introduce myself. Hi everyone, my name is Zongmin and I'm a research fellow at Grand Kennedy Lab at AUS. So I started my longevity research just 1 year ago, and previously I had 2 years postdoc experience at Canada, so studying the cancer bioinformatics research. But then I realized that I want to study the aging, so I come here. My research about the AI policy longevity, including the AI-driven drug discovery, and then validate them using the preclinical model and also the human data. And we found the possible drugs. We also designed the clinical trials.
Welcome, Jenny.
Yeah, so just a small promotion for her. If you guys are planning to live long to 150 years old young, you should actually really pay attention to this panel because they're the one who's doing the really legitimate science research. Or for us, we're also about that later on as well. We are basically the bridge. Abal, as I mentioned previously, we're working on the foundation model for longevity. What we do is that you kind of imagine us as an open AI, but for longevity, where you can plug in your own data, including your lifestyle data, into our foundation model, or using any other apps that we have built in the ecosystem. And you can actually make a prediction of how long you can live based on your current lifestyle. And just outside, by the way, we have a booth, particularly launching a beta version for your energy level, hour by hour. So with what you're doing, with some of the data you have, you can already see how does your daily activities going to change your life. And
Very
that's
exciting.
what we want to show you. And yeah, without further ado, I'm passing along to our very senior collaborator, Juan. That's Art.
Yeah. That's good. So good.
Hey Art, you are the first guest that I see taking notes on the panel. You're literally the first. I've done multiple interviews and you're really the first one taking notes.
I have a very bad memory, so I had to take notes. And I do very few panels, but the ones that I go to, I actually like to engage. So it's out of respect to my fellow panelists that I also take notes. I also like to learn on panels, which is really cool.
Good spirit there.
Yeah, so Vana is a network that allows you to reclaim your data and put it wherever you want, including aggregating it with other people or using it for your own use cases. And where we found a lot of really cool synergy with Anansi is that there are some really strange correlations between things related to your health and well-being and some of the things that you're doing that are captured in your data. We're working on an index that looks at, for instance, how does social media affect your variable heart rate variability. I think this morning, so we went to yoga together this morning, and just to illustrate, like, yoga is something that takes my energy but then gives me energy back afterwards. And it's like, I have to exert energy to feel enriched. But then you think about, like, you go home and you chill and you scroll on TikTok, and theoretically you're supposed to be chilling, but then afterwards you're like, why do I feel so drained? And I think that there's a lot that needs to be unlocked in science based on this data and the correlations that we can draw when we have rich user profiles. That's what we're so excited about Anansi, because we can actually, I think we can unlock the secrets of long life and death.
Sounds good. Yeah.
May I add on to that?
Yeah.
I want to make it as engaging as possible. So there's actually research showing that scrolling on TikTok makes your dopamine crash later on. Because what they really do is to actually pump up your dopamine level, but then if you don't use it, you basically have a crash. And that's why it's kind of similar, like I think you know a lot about that as well, and in glucose, right? The more sugar you take, like you actually get tired, it's because you also have an energy crash because of it. So there are a lot of these data that we're now starting to capture. But we're talking about short term, like for example, after TikTok and after a meal, we're full of calories and full of sugar. But what does it actually do in the long term? How's it going to affect you, right? I think that is what we are super interested about, and also working with Anna and also with like Ryan, also working with Jolene.
Amazing. I feel like everybody gonna gain so much like health tips and like longevity tips today. It's gonna be the most useful other than all the crypto class. I'm sick of this crypto class. Anyways, So yeah, okay, great. So I'm gonna ask them a question because I think obviously all this research is gonna take a lot of money and it's gonna be significant investment involved. And I think that's why you're here, Winnie, to support them and kind of build a more sustainable financial model, right? Because I used to work with UN and we have done work in Africa for years, and after later UN be telling me, oh sorry guys, we're changing our initiative, and suddenly it's a change, and like the work you have put into it's just not sustainable anymore. So I think it's also very important to have a responsible investor at the back to support research and academia, right, in front. So this question is gonna be asking you guys about how you're gonna make sure that those investment doesn't just go to those wealthy elites, but also what's the business model you have to carry out to make sure this is more sustainable, and also how you've been working with public policy to make sure the research you carry out actually have results to the general public. How much you spend? Tell us a number. Yeah, Winnie. Yeah.
I think at the beginning, we use AI driven to screening the drug. It's very cheap. We use a large language model, the API, right?
Yeah.
For example, the OpenAI.
Yeah.
That doesn't cost a lot, but if you come to the validation part using the preclinical data and especially the human data, you need to initiate the cohort study or the clinical trial.
That's expensive.
Yeah. So yeah, and about the public access research results, our Center for Health and Longevity at NUS, we do actually run the weekly free webinar about the longevity. You can also access that through the YouTube channel, so you can see the history. And in this webinar, we invite lots of experts to discuss the practical stuff like nutrition, sleep, exercise, like that. You can really follow. And there is also a Q&A section that any audience can ask questions with the researchers.
So it's like AMAs, like live streaming, or it's like you leave the question and someone will answer?
Oh, you can leave lots of questions there, and there is one responsible to pick the represent the question, and then during the lead webinar, so interact with you.
Okay, so you've been constantly doing that kind of a workshop with people to understand the nutrition ideas. Okay.
And interesting, actually 4 years ago, our center also invited CEO from Vita DAO to discuss how the crypto world that can funding the longevity research. They decide, the community decide to fund the promise and longevity projects.
Nice. So crypto people are actually doing something good, huh? Just kidding.
I think that they can.
For sure.
Ben this morning was talking about RWA, and in fact that's something that we're working on. So let me give you a baseline of how much your data worth first. So back then, I think you guys probably know 23andMe. And actually before 23andMe, there were companies that's collecting your data, particular DNA data. It only costs about like $3 per person. So you're cheap. We are cheap. We are all cheap, right? But for us, the key thing is not just the data itself. I think it's about how you combine the data. Like for example, if all three of us are giving us the data, it's gonna cost way more than just $3 times 4. It will probably be like 3 times 40 or 100. Because when we talk about research, it actually needs to take in a bunch of data sets, just like what Art mentioned. It's not going to be just one data can prove something. It's going to be various of data to prove something we know or to discover something we don't know. And that's what, by the way, our foundation model is working on. We have the AI agent systems to actually take in your data, and then we try to find reasoning of like, why there are particular drugs that work for you but not work for me. And those are the things that we think is valuable. And so far, just FYI, we have trained our model based on the 2.5 million biological samples, thanks to open source database. And we actually have had over 1,000 plus longevity interventions coming out from the foundation model, which is powerful. But the question afterwards is, how can we make these 1,000 assets, drugs, interventions available to all of you, and how do we even make money out of it? And that's where I mentioned the RWA is something that we're going to work on. We're bringing these assets and automate them onto, like hopefully in the future, working with different companies to launch them in RWA, so that in this case, everyone can trade. And for some of the revenues that we get, we will give it back to the people who have contributed data, so that your $3 per DNA will be worth a lot more. And that's like just the draft version of what we do in the simplified version.
So these two have a lot more insights in terms of kind of on the cost and spending side of funding research, of how to make it more efficient to bring those costs down. But I do want to, for folks who aren't familiar with how medical research actually happens right now, it either happens in association with the university institution or in a private company where there's some sort of business case or justification made for that. And these two areas, these two ways that research gets funded create some really perverse outcomes for the things that get developed. So if we're just talking about the funding question, it's actually, there needs to be some way for everyday people to say, hey, I am suffering from this, I need this. Research company, can you please develop it? One of the examples of this that exists today is in the area of antibiotic development. So there is not a strong business case to develop new antibiotics, despite the fact that humans are actually becoming more resistant to antibiotics and there are superbugs floating around. We've all lived through a pandemic that was a viral infection, but the same thing can happen with bacterial infections these days. There is no business case to invest in new drugs. But I'm sure all of us want to make sure that we don't die of a cold in the next 5 years. How do we solve that problem? And I think that that's where doing something where we as communities come together and say we need this is very, very important. So that's on the funding side. I think Web3 has a lot to add to that question, and in RWA's piece helps that because we have tangible assets that we can invest in that can raise capital for the research that needs to go into those assets. Just quickly on the spending side of things, like how do you reduce the cost of research, make it accessible? Again, Web3 has a lot to say for that. When we can aggregate our data together permissionlessly, it makes it easier. I used to do a lot of, I'm probably the least expert on the panel when it comes to biological research. I'm a social scientist, but I used to do social science research, randomized control trials. Similar to medical research, where you have to bring together a lot of people and you have to collect a lot of data. And that's a really expensive thing. People don't understand just how expensive it is to do controlled research. If we can find a way for people to naturally contribute to this research, it really changes the game. So the stuff that Avanasti is doing by allowing you to connect your data, we don't yet know how valuable that is. It could be $3, it could be $300. How much would you pay to live an extra 10 years? And that is the question.
I think that's the question you should ask those people sitting here. How much are you willing to pay to have another 10 years of lifespan? How much?
For me, like, it would be like...
They're thinking. They're really thinking.
It's a huge number.
Like, I will pay a lot more than to my cat and dogs than myself.
Did you see the drug that they just developed to extend dogs' lives? I was like, take my money.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually thinking this question before.
But if you ask someone nearing the end of their life, how much would you pay to live an extra 10 years? That's huge. Like, they would pay a lot because there's a lot that you just think, well, I've dealt with a lot of end-of-life cases in the last year. There's so much that you regret not doing at that point that you would pay anything. So the research that these guys are doing, it sounds far off for all of us in the room. Hopefully, I mean, I'm not going to presume where you are in life, but if you attach a monetary value to it, it could be very, very, very powerful and expensive.
Also, I also asked about public policies, and I think policymakers actually play a huge role here. So I think might be Winnie, and maybe you can talk about a little bit about how you interact with policymakers on this aspect, and any experience it would be welcome.
So just add on to that, by the way, it's actually not a small number for how much we have invested in extending life. You can look it up on Google and ChatGPT. It's actually 38 trillion to extend 1 year. And that's how much it's actually, I mean, yes, we're in Web3 and all that, but like, look, in Web2 world, the traditional world, people are already investing 38 trillion for extending life for 1 year. So if you can think about, like, if all this wealth have actually been on chain and all you can trade it, is actually a huge amount of wealth that you can accumulate if one of these drugs can be successful. Going back to the policy question, I don't have right now because Avalanche Lab is relatively new. We started last year. But my previous experience, I worked on cancer data for more than 10 years. So at that time, we worked a lot with policymaker. And one thing that always I hated and that's also why I started. I transformed myself from Web 2 to Web 3 was because my dad actually died from the fact that he didn't get the right treatment because his data wasn't being transferred from one place to another. And that causes my dad's life. And when we ask the why question, it's kind of like peeling an onion. They will keep telling you that it was their boss who didn't allow them to do the certain things, like did not allow them to transfer the data and whatnot. But eventually, I think a lot of it is just they don't want to take the responsibility of saving or causing someone's lives. So, and I think that usually, that is an acute case. But then, also, if you're looking at like compassionate use products, we always oftentimes find that a lot of regulations cannot catch up with the needs of people. And particularly for patients that just end of life, and they are very different and they really need these quick policy makers to change and kind of adjust their regulations just for living for longer and then saving and watching their kids grow up for 1 more year.
Yeah, and then I think not just in, I think it's everywhere. Like really good health care system is really for a lot of wealthy people, and also like if you go to, I remember when I was in the UK, I had like stomach pain, and then I waited till I went at like 11 at night, and I got to see the doctor at 5 o'clock in the morning because it was a public health care, and there's no alternative. You just have to wait, right? And then the British people are so proud of their healthcare system. They even put in Olympics, right? So I mean, there's a lot of neat ways that we can do in Web3.
I think a lot of the government already pay attention to the aging population. They invest a lot. Take Singapore for example. They spend lots of efforts. I don't know if you heard about the street, Queenstown at Street. It's actually the government support project. There's a community there. The researcher, the scientists in our university, they are like responsible for this, like to guidance or not guidance them to how to be healthier. Is the age population from 40 to 80 years old. So we track them the data and also to show them how to be healthier, and then we take the data so for the research purpose. About the policy, about the funding, I think the government invests a lot, such as the funding, the big one, like million dollars like that. But for the non-traditional, like this, invest the cryptocurrency or decentralized funding. Actually, I'm not know now because there's no typical case we can reference. So
yeah, we're just starting, right? We're still early at this period, which is I think is very promising, and I believe. I think the audience would all agree that everybody here is doing amazing stuff for the, it's definitely very important for us to open up a new way to see how we should treat those medical and pharmaceutical investment. Okay, so, but now it comes to reality. I want to ask you guys about, because obviously we know inventing a new drug takes a lot of time and it's a long time frame, and how would you think about yourself or your institution will solve such issues in terms of dealing with a bigger, longer time frame?
Validate the...
Yeah, validated, yeah.
So I think this may be more proof validated. So take my research for example. So I do have lots of needs come from the AI recommendation that these drugs are high longevity potential. How can I prove that, especially for the long time? So that's we need the longitude cohort studies. For example, the UK Biobank and also the Chinese also have their long time tracks. Even the Singapore, they have the cohort study tracked over decades. So, and the US also have like enhanced data records of participants over 20 years. This database contains their clinical parameters and also the drugs they take, and the outcome will be the health risk and the mortality risk. So we use model to predict the drug if they do protect the patients or not. So that's why we validate use the real human data, and yeah, that can consider long time, and then initiate the clinical trial.
In terms of validation, so far, our foundation model has been able to increase the efficiency from hypothesis to target ID by 6 times. So what does it mean? Basically, you can just kind of try to find a molecule that worked to extend some sort of human lifespan. But usually you don't do it in human because we then run on human to do experiments on. So we usually do it in mice. So for us, we on our foundation model, what we did is that by looking at all the samples data, we have been able to actually have enough reasoning to find a drug that can proven to be somehow extend lives in mice. So that's what we have been working on. Some of them are repurposing drugs, some of them could also be environmental factors, by the way. So that is what AI has been helping us to do in terms of very early stage verification. But in terms of longer terms, there are a lot more work that we still need to do. I think we talked about mice model before. It's really interesting because for mice model, we still need human to work on it. So if we don't have enough human, we still cannot run enough mice study, despite there's a lot more population in mice than in human. So those are actually problems, but I think I know that there are a few startups that are working on it. Why? Because my husband is one of them who is building this lab automation that basically can, it's basically a robot or even a humanoid arm can do a mice experiments for us. So then in this case, there's no longer a scaling matter. Like we need a lot of humans in order to do the mice study, but the AI itself can do the experiments for us, which still raise more mice in this case. But then that's another stage. But then later on, there will be clinical studies that we still need to find ways to move faster, accelerate the process. I think a lot of people are working on digital twins, maybe, for example, that could potentially extend, also accelerate the process of making a drug as well.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I just want to touch on a couple of things that the panelists have said. So longitudinal studies are so expensive, and it's constrained by something that people don't think about really when doing research, but it's constrained by time. I can't just get more and more people and have like a time series data set. I have to literally sit and wait. So longitudinal studies are incredibly valuable. We've all dealt with those data sets. So valuable, so important, and it's so hard to get consistency year on year. The intergenerational studies that they've done in the past, like there's massive drop off. You might start off with 100 people, you might have 4 people at the end of it. So it's really hard to get that kind of data. Why do I mention that? Again, I'm a qualitative researcher, I'm a social science researcher. I did an impact evaluation, which was a longitudinal study on a community in Colombia once. And I went there with my survey tool, and I tried to ask them a bunch of questions. Nobody knows what they did 6 months ago. If I asked you, like, what did you shop for at the grocery store 6 months ago, you wouldn't know. But you know who does know? Facebook. You know, like we are now massive longitudinal studies just walking around. Because we got all of this data. We use health trackers. I was talking to Winnie about which one I should buy because I need to upgrade. We have all of this data. So if we need to do a longitudinal study, we could all in this room just participate in one with all of the data that we've already created over the last 20 or 30 years or however long. So I think in terms of knowledge production, there just needs to be a better coordination mechanism because we have digitized these things. I live in a country with digitized health records as well. So like now you also have diagnoses, you also have pharmaceuticals, you have all of these things that we can track against our data and our general sense of well-being, which is fascinating. Never before have we been in a place where we have this. But then it begs the question, where does this information live? It lives in data silos all around. If we could break those down, I think we could do so much for human knowledge, so much for human development. It would make all of our jobs so much easier, and that's what we're trying to do at Varna, just to really just break down these barriers to human knowledge. Just one thing I wanted to touch on in terms of what Winnie's doing as well. I don't know if you guys, maybe it was like probably 5 or 6 years ago, we had the crisis of replicability. Basically, a lot of studies came out that people couldn't reproduce the outputs of. You know, and it was a huge crisis in the scientific community. It was a crisis of methodology. Now, I think because of that, there has been a conversation around, well, what actually qualifies as knowledge now? So the FDA, for example, doesn't regulate health supplements in the same way as it regulates pharmaceuticals. And we have a problem there because it's like, okay, so then what passes the threshold of, you know, this ashwagandha is going to make me focus more versus this Ritalin is going to help me focus more. And so I think there's actually a lot more space to generate new types of knowledge with a different bar today than there was 6 years ago because we had that crisis. So to your question of like, how do we produce more knowledge as a scientific community, we're changing the bar and we're also changing the inputs. And I think that's really exciting, which is why I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, and I think just to follow up on what you said, I think you mentioned that we need a better system to coordinate all this information and data to make sure that we're working on a more efficient manner, right? Do you see any collective responsibilities from what you do as a general or from your institution, from Mana, or and also to touch on the mice experiment, is there any ethical issues that we face as a longevity industry? So that will be my next question for you guys.
Yeah, I'll touch on the policy point because it relates to this ethics point of like, how have we created a system where it is where we're producing algorithms that force me to be addicted to my phone, and that seems to be a better use case for that data than maybe addressing mental health. Like, why do we have an economic system that exists in that way? And we all have a responsibility to change that system through policy, through our individual behaviors, and remaining educated on these topics. I will say that in longevity research, we have one tailwind, and it's that we have a rapidly aging population of voters. So if you're in a government in the West, you will have a lot of folks that are getting older and older, and they're all voters. And so leveraging that energy to put more research into changing stuff around longevity, I think is going to be something we'll see in the next few years. So folks that are not bullish on longevity, you're not looking at demographic patterns. These guys are going to vote. There's going to be a lot of money flowing into longevity over the next 10 to 15 years.
So I guess this question is actually more towards ethics, right? So the more science I learn, the more I don't want to put a pressure on what is ethical, really. Like, it challenged me a lot because, for example, my co-founder, Aberdeen, worked on re-engineering human. Basically, we can change your protein. Like, do you think it's ethical? Do you think it's ethical to allow everyone here and everyone in the world to live till 150, really? Because that also means that we're putting so much we're putting so much pressure to the earth. We're also putting so much pressure for the younger generation who could probably don't have a chance to give birth because we're taking out all the space, taking up all the resources, right? But obviously there are a lot of questions that we're not answering at the moment. So I feel sometimes the more that I go into longevity and working harder on the topics that we're talking about, it's actually harder for me to answer, at least at this stage. Maybe next year when in the same conversation we'll have clear thought. But at least for now, the questions that I will always ask myself is not for me. It's actually more for my loved ones. Would I want my loved ones to live for longer? If I think it's ethical to allow my loved ones to live longer and also healthier, I think that is something that I think is ethical, at least in my own standards. But I don't think that I can always say to everyone that, look, this is what you should do, because I think it's also unethical to put an ethics into your term. So
That's a good point. Yeah.
I want to point out that longevity research, we actually more care about the healthy longevity. Say we do not want people like live to 200 years old. Like if you
We do not want to leave them long.
no, it's like if you live 100 years old, we want 99 years of your life you are in good health and then die in the quickly. I mean, yeah. So that means if you get sick at your early 60s, then you will live rest of your life you have lots of disease and torture you like that. So what we can do for now, I think since I study the longevity and I started to care about how long I do not care how long I can live. I just want to know how healthy can I live. So I just do the exercise and use what I already learned to guidance myself, my family, and my friends to get a healthier lifestyle like that. And I do feel, as I say, I studied the longevity 1 year. I do feel myself become more stronger, and I feel great. So I think this year I'm over like 30 years.
You don't have to obligate to expose and disclose your age if you don't want to.
It's okay. I want to say, if I 10 years later, people will say, "Oh, you look
You
like
still look the same."
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Exactly. I think that. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So, as a founder of a larger protocol, people always ask, like, "Oh, how do I identify the scam projects?" Right? One really telling thing about people who are legitimately interested in science and the science of longevity is they tend to be deeply integrated people who think about their own personal health and their own well-being, and deeply spiritual people. Because the deeper you get into science, the deeper you get into the purpose of why we exist. So if you're trying to look out for a scam, it's the people who don't think like these ladies on the panel, because these guys think about these questions deeply, and that's why I respect them so deeply.
Thank you. That's a really good add up. I feel like this is gonna be a hard question for you for the coming up one, because obviously it's hard to achieve all together, and we say there's a lot of trilemma in this industry, longevity industry, because obviously there's the accessibility questions. If we can make it accessible for the general public, we have the issue of ethical issues, which I think you have a really give a very excellent answer on. And also we have the efficacy issue, right? So I want you guys to share a little bit more based on your work experience and the things that you have encountered. Is there any trade-off that you have encountered in the past experience? And also, how do you prioritize those things when you're actually practicing it?
Yeah, I like that question.
You like that question? Good.
Yeah. So for me, I think the most important is efficacy. We need to validate the drugs quickly, so people can access to that. And about the validation, we need to use the human data, so that come to using the cohort or the clinical trials, so that involve the ethic. So, but we cooperate with the doctors and also the policymaker to make sure we do it is correct.
Yeah, so efficacy comes up top of other things. Okay.
So when you talk about trade-off, do you mean personal trade-off, a company trade-off in Web3, or what?
Anything. I mean, just I think the general question comes with efficacy, accessibility, and also ethics. But I mean, you're welcome to share anything that you feel like you want to share.
So, I mean, it's not my first time starting a company. I started 2 companies before, so from both Web2 and Web3. And one thing that I've learned in the hard way is that if you want to be successful, you just need to forget about all the noises. I cannot imagine how much pressure you have while you about to launch your token. I think we're gonna face the same issue. I don't know how much pressure you have if you just tell people bad news about, oh, I'm sorry that you cannot live for long because of you're sick. You're gonna get so many noises on the online. And before I try to avoid it by being nice. And you know what? Right now I'm like, fuck it. I don't even care. Like things. I'm trying not to get those noises out in my way of building something that I think is truly meaningful. And I think the next thing that we're gonna do, obviously, is we're gonna launch token. We're gonna launch a lot of assets that it's high risk, but it's also, if it's one of them is successful, it can extend all your life for 10, 20 years. I might even think about tokenizing everyone. In this case, and then everyone knows their consequences, right, of not living well for you and also for other people, and then we can bet on you. I think those are fun things, but I don't know how many people would just yell at Winnie and then throw an axe on me. It could be, but at this point, I just don't care because I know how important our work is and how important it is to actually unleash science and unleash the ability, accessibility for everyone to have the equal rights to live for as full as possible for all of us. So I think that's the trade-off I have when it comes into Web3 and also what we're working on. I know that there will be a lot of people don't like us, but I just don't care.
I love that attitude. It's just working and then figuring out things along the way, right? Obviously, we don't know the answer at the end, but at least we are making sure that we're right on the right track and keep doing things. Amazing.
I love that yellow approach. It's awesome. I love it. So I actually look at the trade-offs in generating scientific research. So typically you have the idea in AI. Folks, I'm an AI guy. So you have open source and closed source, right? ChatGPT, closed source. Everyone here probably uses it. There are open source LLMs like Llama. Put your hand up if you use it. You probably don't. So in terms of efficacy, there is this debate. It's been here since the dawn of intellectual property of like, do we need to attach some monetary value to something in order for us to invest in that technology? And I think Web3 and the work that we're all doing on the stage has the ability to change the conversation. And instead of saying it's either going to be open source and shit, and it will closed source and we don't have access to it, there's an in-between. It can be collectively owned so that the people who are providing the capital and providing the data and providing the research have enough capital to keep going, but also have the motivation of the community behind them. If there's a single use case for the ideology of Web3, it's coming together to create knowledge. And I think that we don't have to make that trade-off if we're able to scale the things that we're each doing.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing all that information and the knowledge that you have. And I'm really appreciating, we actually have some people in crypto can represent the good people and saying and doing all these meaningful things. And I think it really means a lot for the crypto and also not just for now, not just because you're doing meaningful stuff, but also I think will have a very sustainable impact in the long run as well. And I cannot express how appreciative I am right now because I believe the people who are sitting here from the beginning to the end, they also really value the things you do. So thank you very much again, and I hope you guys share more in the future. If there's anything you want to share about your company, your vision, this is the last time that you will have a chance to. Say a little bit. No, say a little bit about Vana. I think what you do about the data things is really interesting.
I mean, like, to put it in a nutshell, like, the data that you have is currently sitting in silos, and that's not good for you, and it's not good for society. So if we can create a decentralized protocol that allows you to move your data wherever you want, you can aggregate that with other people and create new knowledge. You can just aggregate it for yourself and understand more about you. And that's generally the ethos that we're building here at Vana. That protocol shouldn't be owned by a company. I'm not trying to recreate Google 2.0. Like, that should be a decentralized protocol owned by us that allows us to really regain the power of our data back.
One thing, I think all of you should really care of yourself and where is your data is. If you can also make money out of that, just go ahead and support Vana, support us. Who knows, maybe your data will become worth 1 million in the future.
What's the best way to keep updated on the things you've done?
Yeah, so we're going to have an announcement next week. Pay attention to our X and also Twitter. Vana is Vana at Vana, right? At Vana, and for us it's at Avanasi Labs. So you should follow
Check
us.
out the website and everything.
Yeah, particularly also for Avanasi Labs, you can check out our new app that launching today, beta version. But you will get airdrops for good things that you do for yourself. And in the future, who knows? Maybe we'll give you some interesting tokens.
And we have the booth outside, right? So we can try the beta out just outside. Sounds good. I want particularly like health tips from you. I think they're gonna benefit everyone here.
So maybe you can follow our health Center for Health and Longevity at NUS. You can find them at YouTube. You can always watch all the previous history, the video from the experts, professors.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah, join our community.
Yay! Okay, great. I think that's everything for the panel today. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's thank them again. Okay. Sorry guys, you have me a lot for today.